Ooh. We're testing out the new spot welder today. We got the new K-weld unit. We got our own custom power supply, I guess. And we're doing some testing on some 18650 cells. And we're gonna see how high we can push this thing and what it takes to actually weld the connections that we're using in the battery. I'm gonna start by pulling the battery out of my truck because why go to work when can electric bike? In the next 6 minutes of the video, I show how I set this power supply up, so if you're only interested in the testing, you can skip ahead. I got the battery in. These are some of the Amazon battery connections that I like. I can link them in the description. I built the K-weld unit already. It's pretty straightforward, but I can dive into it if enough of you ask in the comments. Okay, I want to walk through my plan real quick here. We got the big old battery out of my truck and the K-weld right here with the battery leads off of it. These are the little tiny battery leads that it comes with. These are supposedly fine, and you're not supposed to make your leads any longer than that, not just because of the wire size, but also because of, I guess, feedback that it gets from the line being extra long. So O'Reilly's didn't even stock connectors that connected to 8 gauge wire that were the good solid copper ones like I like. So I had some of this either 4 or 6 gauge. It doesn't say on it for some reason, but had that wire laying around, and I got some connectors that'll connect to that. Should be able to keep it the same length. When I put it right here, it'll mount something like this. I need to make an actual mount that attaches to the battery. Not that it's super necessary, but it'll be nice. And then those leads will come off right there and right there. And it should be pretty slick. Shouldn't increase the length at all. So we're going to get these lines cut and get the connectors crimped on and then fill them with solder. As far as battery choice goes, I know lithium batteries are sweet and lithium-ion phosphate batteries are sweet. And, you know, there's plenty of other types of batteries, and lead acid a lot of times seems like an outdated type of battery. But for the case of spot welders, they're actually kind of the best option. They're really, really good at crazy high amps for a very short period of time. So I was a mechanic for a lot of years, and one thing that we always did when we did battery connections like this is we would crimp them good. The crimping is obviously the most important thing here. You don't want to just solder these on. In this case, just crimping it on is probably fine, but just because this is the way I'm used to doing it, I'm going to go back and fill it with solder after I crimp it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting little access points into the wire, and then I'm going to put that wire into the vise here. I have just this little tiny vise to hold it in place. And then you don't want to do this with a soldering iron either. That would take forever, and you'd heat up the wire itself a lot more than you need to. I have a little snap-on torch that I usually use for this, but it's out of butane, so I got to use this mega farmer torch. But same idea, but you're heating up the eyelet, and then that's going to want to suck in the solder. So I'm going to show that right here. That connection's kind of in the way there, so I'm going to chop a little bit off the end of that. Might be able to do it with these cutters right here. These are my copper only cutters, so they stay pretty sharp. Yeah, there we go. There we go. There's our nice positive lead right there, extra short, and then this negative one a little extra long, but it's alright, it evens out. We'll put the cover back on that guy and start testing it out there. Okay, we are going to hook it up to initial power. Get that turned on. This one's a freaking 14 millimeter. Don't know why. It's probably the only battery terminal in the world that isn't a 8, a 10, or a 13. Okay, we have power. So now that it has power, the first thing it wants us to do is calibrate it. So I'll be showing how to do that next. It's pretty simple. Okay, let's see if we can knock out this calibration here. So we will say okay. And this is open, which means that you want to keep the circuit open. So keep these separated, and then we'll hold the foot pedal until it says off. Now it says short, which means that we need to push these together. The best way to do it is get as much surface area touching as possible. And if you see a spark when you do this, then you need to try again. So I'll do it right there. We want to program our cable length next. That's what's pulled up. So when you get to the cable length, just press it. I measured mine at about 1.19, so I'm going to do 1.2 meters, and I'm still at 35 joules, and I think that's all that we have to program here. So we should be good to just start testing. Alright, let's start testing. I got some 18650s here that I pulled out of a bad battery. They have little bits stuck to the end from pulling the welds off, so I just kind of got to hit it with a file first, get it back down to a somewhat flat surface before we start spot welding to it. What I have for testing are, these are some samples that I had sent to me from the people who made my actual connections. These ones right here. So these are the actual ones that I'll be putting in the battery. But before I start touching these pretty things, I want to practice. So we're gonna go through these first. I'm gonna start with the ones in the bag. But before I get to that even, I have just some 0.3 millimeter thick nickel, which is really thick for nickel, but I figured it'd be a good starting point for this nickel copper mix there. So to start off, let me get my dikes out. That is some thick nickel. I don't know if you've dealt with nickel strips much, but this is a lot thicker than people usually use. So we'll do a first test, try it out. I'm set at 35 joules. Maybe I'll just go right to 40. I don't know, why not, right? See if we can light this thing on fire. So 40 joules. I'm gonna do a first test. Oh, I'm a little scared. Alright. Here goes nothing. Well, that didn't work. Okay, so it looks like even 40 joules is not enough to get through that nickel there. We'll try 45, and I'll push harder also. Because I wasn't pushing very hard. I didn't think about that. Okay, pushing really hard. Alright, got the end stuck a little bit. Got pretty good looking welds, nothing crazy. Yeah, so it pulled off and it was not, it didn't leave any behind. So that tells me it's not enough for this. We'll try again. This other stuff I think is a little thinner, but it's copper, so I figured it would be similar to this. So I want to get this like in a roughly good starting point, and then I'll switch over. So we'll try this again. Those welds are definitely looking better. You can see even just moving 5 joules at a time, it's actually changing it quite a bit. So, looks like that one, it definitely deformed the nickel before pulling it off. And it even deformed that a little bit, but it didn't rip the nickel. But 0.3 millimeter nickel is going to be a lot harder to rip than 0.1 like people usually use. So, I think maybe it's worth just trying one of these next. I'll pull one of these out so you can see it. So this is technically a copper-nickel sandwich because it's nickel on that side and copper on that side. But they fused them together here. I think it's just a thin, like maybe it's just a coating of nickel on the top because it looks like most of it's copper. And it's significantly thinner than that. So maybe we should start on a lower joule setting, but that's not fun. Let's just go for it. Alright, here we go. Whoa. Yeah, that might have been a little bit too much there. Those are some really solid looking welds. That might be a way to go. See if we can pull that off. Get some good pliers here. Didn't come off very nice. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. You got a good view there? So that is ripping right through it. That might be the place to start right there. That's 50 joules. Let's do another one. Okay, no, I'm not going to do it on that. That was a little screwy. See if we can just pull the rest of the way off. Actually, when I started pulling the other way, it did pop it out. Well, the middle of the weld is still there, but it popped off everything around it. So I'm going to just leave it as is. It'll squish around it. These aren't very thick, so it should be good. The cool thing about these, they have this slot in the middle of them. And if you look on the Endless Sphere forum, there's a lot of good input on that in the copper nickel sandwich section about they're just doing everything they can to maximize the weld. And they talk about having that gap and having your electrodes on either side of the gap help force the travel of the electricity through the battery cell. Which is pretty neat. Here we go. Another one here. Oh, that's cool. That is a super solid connection. I'm loving that. So let's try to pull this thing apart now. So rip that end off. All 4 welds are sticking really good. Man, is that just dialed in? I don't think it's like causing any damage. It's not like it's too hot. It's not blowing through. I don't see any like damage looking like it's happening to these little battery cells. I think I'll call that pretty solid right there at 50 joules. I don't think it needs more. Makes me wonder what it can do. Like, why not, right? Let's test it. We'll go 55. Let's get a new cell. Oh, we can do the other side. So when I go to run the whole battery, I'll hook this up to a charger to keep this battery topped off. But for now, it's just sitting here. This probably isn't the spot that I'll be doing it either, because you can see most of the space that I have right here is taken up by the battery. So, all right. Send that a little better. This is 55 joules. Oh, that sparks. That's so scary. Doesn't look any different, really. Maybe we'll put a 60 right next to it. I don't think I should go above 60. Especially with the sparks it's making. That's pretty crazy. There we go. Oh. 60 looks fairly similar too. I'm definitely not seeing as big of a jump as I was seeing initially getting up to this point. Seems to be a fairly good range of what's actually good. So we'll pull it off and see if maybe we can see any damage possibly happening to the cell. I really want to test it higher than I plan to do it on the good battery, because I don't want to be like close. Like if 50 joules is great and then 55 explodes it, I probably want to look more at like 45. But yeah, see, that's looking pretty good still. Maybe, I mean, seems like even that would be a good one to weld with. I know I said I shouldn't go over 60, but here we go. Oh. The whole wires and everything jolt when it does that. It's so crazy. That actually went... See, I think that's starting to melt it too much. That seems to be a little bit too far. Let's pull it off and see. Well, no, what the heck? Let's throw on a 70. If we can do it, why not do it, right? This is 70 joules. I think 40 is what was recommended to me. But why not push things farther than you should, right? Okay. Man, they're really solid looking. That's pretty cool. Yank that thing off of there. See if we can show you close up. I don't think it's showing any signs of wanting to like puncture through or something. I was kind of wanting to just go until I light one of these puppies on fire. I just don't want any chance of doing that to my good ones. So, okay, so here I can see just a tiny bit of discoloration maybe on the cell itself. It's hard to tell for sure, but I'm thinking that's what's going on. Well, we definitely are getting into a dangerous range that we're not supposed to be in, I think. So let's try 75. Because why not, right? I haven't seen any fire yet. There we go, 75. Super solid. Getting rainbowing is getting a lot bigger. That's still looking solid, like why not? 80. Getting a little bit off center here. There we go. Oh, that one didn't spark at all. That was just... It sure got orange though. That lit right up. Wow. I wonder, I'm pushing hard. I don't know why it was sparking before. I could see it sparking if you're not pushing hard enough, but I didn't seem to push harder on that one than the others. Here we go. Let's see if we can. I still don't see any damage there. Man, this is pretty crazy. I don't even know. I mean, this is just a battery out of my truck. It's not anything crazy. I don't know how high we can even go. Looks like we have 1,000 cranking amps. So supposedly the K-weld can do up to 2,000 amps. They just don't recommend you do it. So if I needed more, I could go pull the other battery out of the truck, because, you know, those diesels got 2 of them. And you're not supposed to hook it in series, but hooking it in parallel and doubling the discharge, that'd be sweet. And heck, they say it can be done, you just shouldn't. I don't like I shouldn't go to 85 joules. And here we are. Trying it. Here we go. Oh, there's so much juice going into that thing. Man. If one of these lights on fire, I have nothing to do with it. Like, my garbage cans are full. And one's plastic. I should probably have a game plan here if something lights on fire. Trying 90 joules next. No, I'm not adding safety precautions in the meantime, because why would I do that? Okay, here we go. Felt like a good one. Ooh, that one rainbowed right to the middle on both of them. And I definitely see some discoloration on the top of the cell. You know, while we're here, we should switch back to the nickel and see how that does at the 90 joules, because we haven't tested that in a minute. I'm having fun. I don't know about you, but this is fun to me, seeing how high we can push this thing. Let's keep going. Let's just cut off a new piece. This stuff is thick. It's kind of hard to cut. The battery's sitting all wonky because there's a bunch of spot welds hanging out the other side. So we never really got that good of a connection on this, but we stopped at like, what, 45 or something? Let's try it. Oof. That's weird. So it's been kind of sticking to the just straight nickel, but it wasn't sticking to the copper nickel sandwich. I'm sure someone knows some science behind that. I don't. Let's see if it'll pull off. Alright, so we got like 50-50 right there. On the screen. So one of the halves of the weld ripped right out like it should, and the other one didn't. So I would almost say 90 joules is not enough for 0.3 millimeter nickel. Not that I know of anyone who's using 0.3 millimeter nickel, but if you are, looks like you need more than 90 joules. So here we go. 95 coming right up. You actually do have to push pretty hard to like deform it into place sometimes with the little bumps. It's weird I'm getting less sparking. I think maybe I'm just figuring out how to do it better. I think I just wasn't pushing hard enough. It felt like I was pushing hard enough, but you have to push enough to like deform it. And then I haven't been getting sparks since. So good to know on that front. Whoa, that one didn't even stick at all. It must have been because I had a bunch of crap in the way. Let's get another one. I'm sure it's not ideal to use cells that have been welded before, but it's what I got, so that's what we're using. Alright, let's cut another one of these. And what the heck, let's go all the way to 100. Not messing around. This is 100 joules on 0.3 millimeter nickel. Make sure it's pushed down in place good. And let's go ahead and do another one right here. I've been noticing these like starting to warm up a little bit, but definitely not getting hot. Wow, that nickel's hot though. That sure warmed it up. So without pulling it off, because if you're actually doing it for good, you're not going to be pulling it off. So just to get an idea, this one looks really good before I pull it off. So if it pops off, then something that we need to know. See, that's not ideal. It definitely pulled some material off of this, it looks like. That's probably a good weld, but it's not as good as it looked. Like that, on that end, it looked like it was really solid. So if you're thinking about using 0.3 millimeter nickel, you're probably better off to use copper to do a copper nickel sandwich. I mean, you're better off anyways because there's a lot less resistance in copper, so you build less heat and have a lot more energy transfer. So you want to use copper when you can, but as opposed to going thicker nickel because it's easier to weld, honestly, this has been easier to weld so far. So I would stay away from nickel anytime you can. I mean, obviously, I'm not counting in like 0.15 and 0.1 millimeter nickel. That's going to be way easier to weld. Like, for sure, you could probably buy one of those cheap battery-powered Amazon spot welders and weld that. But I'm talking like enough nickel to get some decent amps through, and it's harder to weld than copper that can get similar amps. So, and then you'll have less heat at that amount of amps. So I would stick with using copper when you can. Honestly, I don't think that there's any time that I would want to just use 0.15 millimeter nickel, which is pretty much all the ones on Amazon can do. So I think it's worth buying the K-weld if you're going to be putting any sort of amps through it. But then, yeah, do that copper nickel sandwich. I would go look at the Endless Sphere forum and see what they've talked about on there, because they've done a lot more testing than I have. But let's just throw on one of these. Oh, you know what? We got to test one of these at 100 joules. We skipped right over 95 for these, didn't we? Should we switch to this side? Let's get some filing going on. I will say, definitely getting better welds than was originally on this battery. Now, there's some of these that are ripped on these cells, but it's because they were using 0.15 millimeter nickel, and that's crappy. But it was a battery out of a little like camper mini fridge that I had. So not ever going to pull any sort of amps, but still not super impressed. All right, 100 joules on the copper nickel sandwich. Here we go. Oh, it sparked again. I wonder if I was not pushing hard enough. Let's try again. Push real nice and good. Oh, still sparked. All right, maybe it doesn't have everything to do with me just holding it good enough. I mean, the welds look fantastic. I definitely feel that I just like put it up to my ear to feel heat, and that was weird. I don't hear anything. Seems to be a good weld that it's building up a bit of heat, into the cell, which is obviously that's why you want to spot weld instead of solder, is to avoid heat in the cell. But yeah, I wonder at what point, is there a point where you are not seeing damage to the cell, but the heat that you're putting into it from the spot weld is still enough to damage it a little bit? Like, it cools off quick, but it's weird how fast it transfers the heat. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, but so like immediately after spot welding it, I'm feeling heat down here, just a little bit. It's not hot, but it's warm. And then I can touch up here, and it seems to be not much warmer. Okay, grand finale. We'll just go 110. Slap on this bad boy. Ooh, I think I just broke the cell. Did you hear that? Whoa, it did something weird. It might have not been the cell. It looks like, so I was touching the copper plate there, which is something that I need to think about now, I guess. So it must have done some weird sparking between the copper there and down there. It made a weird sound, and then yeah, you got all that extra rainbowing. That's kind of a weird thing to happen. See that well? There you go. Let's try it again. Try to avoid touching the edges. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but the edges are right there, and that's going to change. It's going to flow easier through the copper. Yeah, okay. So, what was that, 110? 110 joules, we are blowing through it. Like, that is through the copper nickel sandwich there and into the cell. Not just the connection, but like, I think there's a hole where the copper nickel sandwich was. Oh gosh. Okay, still can't even pull that off. Need to like put the needle nose on it and roll it. Do it this way too. Wow, that left quite the indent there. Pretty cool. So I am seeing a difference still. I was wondering, like, if I keep going up in joules, is it going to tell me when to stop since it tracked the amps it could pull from the battery? Or is it going to just keep going and it just can't pull enough juice out of the battery to actually give me what it's showing? But it seems to be actually adding power when I increase the joules. So it seems pretty crazy all the way up at 110, but I think there's a way to tell. So when you push the pedal, it obviously does the jolt here. But if you hold it afterwards, it gives you a readout of what you actually did. So I'm going to show that here. Let me get ready for another spot weld. So watch that screen. I'm going to do the spot weld and then hold it down. It says okay. Cycles through. So let's test another one, and I'll go back up to 110 and see if it shoots us out a different number of what it actually gave us. So I'll go up to okay. So we're at 110 here. Let's get this set up. Okay, ready to go. Where the freak did my foot pedal go? Alright, here we go. It says 110 joules. That's it, it took 1500 amps. The battery says I can only do 1,000. That's pretty cool. Okay, so what do those numbers mean is the question. Just pulled up the K-weld operation manual here to show. This is the numbers that we cycled through right here. So our first one is just the counted pulses since power on. So the first one was, you know, the 0, 0, 0, 0, 24, and then 25. And then the next number is the amount of energy in joules that was actually delivered by the pulse. So if it went well, then it's the same value that you entered before. So that's cool because the numbers that we saw are the exact numbers that we put in to the 10th. So very exciting on that. So we were actually giving it 75 joules on the first one and actually giving it 110 on the second one. The next number is the pulse duration that was necessary to achieve the requested energy level. Our second one was 55.95 and our first one was 37.27. Since my amps were the same, which I'll get back to in a minute, it takes more time to deliver the same amount of joules in a weld. So the next one is the average current that was flowing through the spot weld. And I got the same number on both of these on each one. So my battery can do 1500 amps, and to make a higher joule weld, you just apply that 1500 amps for longer. And then it calculates the resistance. I'm not sure what to compare these numbers to. I don't have a good reference for that, but it looks like our 75 joule weld was 0.98 and our 110 joule weld was 0.9. So makes sense because I was putting them through the same thing. It should be about the same number. Different power levels of welds, but welding the same parts. That'll be cool to be able to measure that in case I want to try out different things. I can see how much resistance is in it. In this case, resistance is a good thing because the more resistance that you have, the easier it is to weld, typically. And then it becomes the opposite effect when you actually need to use the battery because the resistance builds heat and causes voltage drop. So we want to avoid that in that case. And then the last one is just the temperature. Our 110 joule weld was 28 degrees Celsius. I'm guessing that's just ambient. And then the 75 was 27.8 degrees Celsius. So pretty cool. I thought this information was helpful. I didn't realize how much you could really gain by reading into that. So very excited to see that they're tracking it that well. That's one of the many upsides to using a K-weld unit compared to a cheap Amazon one. Anyways, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Thanks for watching. Please keep following along with this build. I really appreciate the support from the community that I'm getting here. So we'll see you next time. Bye.